My name is Evelyn Foster. I was 34 years old the day my father gave my brother $1.2 million and gave me a sentence. We were standing in a rented hall outside Ashton County, Vermont. The whole family had come. Snow was falling outside. My father, Richard Foster, raised a glass, called my brother Nathan to the front, and handed him a check to start his own business. Everyone clapped. Then he turned to me, calm as a closing door, and said, "You, daughter, go earn your own." I did not argue. I smiled, thanked him, and sat back down. But what I did in the next 12 months, and what my grandfather did quietly when no one could see, is the reason a lawyer would one day slide an envelope across a table and make my father scream like a man losing his breath. Welcome to Cold Truths, where ordinary people meet impossible families and quiet women keep their receipts. If a story has ever made you sit up a little straighter, you are in the right place. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back into that hall. It smelled faintly of sawdust because half the guests were men from the lumberyard who had come straight from a shift. The check my father held was real. $1.2 million. Large enough to read from the back row. Nathan took it the way he took everything, like it had been waiting for him his whole life. He grinned, kissed my mother's cheek, said something about disruption and vision. People laughed in the right places. My father watched him the way other men watch a sunrise. Then he found me near the dessert table. "I want you to understand something." He was not cruel about it. Cruel would have been easier. He was gentle, almost fatherly. When he said the words that closed a door I had been knocking on for 34 years, "Go earn your own," the room did not gasp. That is the part that stayed with me. They just nodded. Like a daughter being told to fend for herself was the natural order of things. My mother smiled into her wine. My aunts touched my arm and told me how proud they were. And at the far end of the hall, near the fireplace, sat my grandfather, Walter Foster, 79 years old. The man who had built the whole lumber business from one truck and a bad knee in 1965. When Nathan took the check, the entire room applauded. Walter did not. He sat with his hands folded, looking at me. He did not move them an inch, I noticed. I think he wanted me to. I just did not understand yet what it meant. Here is the thing. Nobody clapping that night knew about me. None of it surprised me. I had been reading the room my whole life. In our family, Nathan brought the energy into a space. I brought the spreadsheets. He was 2 years younger and treated like a firstborn son out of a story. I was the one who did the taxes. I started keeping the family's books at 19, the year my father's bookkeeper quit and nobody else could read a ledger. I caught a vendor double billing us $8,000. I never got a thank you. I just got handed more work. By 25, I had passed my CPA exams and taken a job at a small accounting firm 2 towns over. My family knew the title and never once asked what I did with it. My mother had a way of summing it up that I could never quite shake. She said it years before, kindly, the way she said most of the worst things. Nathan carries the name. You just keep the books. I used to think that was wisdom. That night, driving back to my apartment across town, I finally heard it for what it was. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that because people expect tears here. I made coffee, opened a fresh notebook, and at the top of the first page, I wrote the only thing I was sure of. Start. I did not know what I was starting. I only knew I was done waiting to be picked. The next morning, I drove out Route 9 to the lumberyard. I told myself I was just dropping off the quarterly numbers. That was a lie I let myself keep. The truth was, I wanted to see my grandfather. Walter was already there when I pulled in. Because Walter was always already there. His chipped blue enamel mug sat on the counter, where it had sat since before I was born. He poured me a coffee I did not ask for, and slid it over without a word. I told him about the check. I told him what my father had said. I expected comfort, maybe an apology on my father's behalf. Walter did not do either. He looked at me over that old mug and asked one question. So, what is the plan? Not, are you okay? Not, that is not fair. What is the plan? I started to say I did not have one and stopped. Because I did. I had written it down the night before. He listened while I talked it through. This half-formed idea of doing for small shops what I had always done for free for my family. Clean books. Smart money. A way out of the hole. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing I would carry like a stone in my pocket for the next year. I am not betting on the loud one. I am betting on the one who shows up. Outside, the first snow of the day started to tap against the tin roof of the office. He told me to come back the next day. He said he wanted to show me the old books. I did not know why yet. You have to understand what Foster Lumber and Supply meant in Ashton County. My grandfather started it in 1965 with one flatbed truck. By the time I was born, it was the place every contractor, every weekend carpenter, every widow fixing a porch came through. It put half the town's roofs over half the town's heads. My father had run it for 15 years, and he ran it well. But he never built it. He had inherited it. I think that gap lived in him like a splinter he could not reach. To prove he was a builder, not just an heir, he bet big. He took out a loan to put up a second warehouse on the edge of town. A fancy expansion he talked about at every dinner. And he had carved $1.2 million out of the family's future to crown Nathan as the next great Foster. People in town already spoke about my brother like he was the heir apparent. Nobody mentioned the daughter who balanced the books. I was not bitter about being left out of the story. I was something colder and more useful. I was paying attention. One afternoon at the yard, sorting old files for Walter, I came across the loan paperwork for the new warehouse. I read it the way I read everything. Slowly. Twice. My father had not just borrowed against the business. He had borrowed against what he expected to inherit from Walter someday. He was spending money he did not have yet on a promise no one had put in writing. I did not say a word. I just filed it away in the cabinet, and in my head. My first real client found me by accident. His name was Tom Vasquez, and he ran a one-man repair shop off Main Street. The kind of place that fixes your lawnmower and your marriage in the same afternoon. Tom was drowning. He owed 3 vendors. His books were a shoebox. The bank had stopped returning his calls. A mutual friend mentioned that the foster girl was good with numbers. He called me on a Tuesday, embarrassed, ready to be talked down to. I did not have money to lend him. I want to be clear about this because this is where people expect a rich relative to swoop in. There was no rich relative. There was just me and a notebook. So I did the only thing I knew how to do well. I went through every number in that shoebox. I restructured what he owed. Found him a small line of credit at a credit union that still believed in handshakes. Renegotiated 2 of his vendor contracts down to something a human could pay. I charged him a modest fee and wrote up a real agreement. Signed and dated, so we both knew exactly where we stood. That night, I gave the thing a name. I wrote it across the top of a new file. Foster Ventures. It was not a fund. It was not anything yet. It was a name and a promise to keep the books clean. 2 weeks later, Tom sent me 2 more men from his street. They came in embarrassed too. They left with a plan. I started to think the thing I had written down might actually have a shape. While I was rebuilding Tom Vasquez's shoebox, my brother was throwing a party. Nathan used a slice of his million to launch his venture in style. He leased an office with exposed brick and a wall of glass. The kind of place that costs more to look successful in than to actually be successful. He hired a friend to design a logo, another friend to run social media, and a third friend nobody could explain. The launch had a bar. My parents came. My mother wore a new dress and told everyone her son was an entrepreneur. My father stood by the window with his arms crossed, proud the way men are proud of things they have purchased. I went because not going would have been a statement, and I was not ready to make statements yet. I stood near the back and watched the money move in the wrong direction. At one point, a man Nathan was courting as an investor drifted over to me, mistaking me for staff, and asked a real question about margins. I answered it plainly. He blinked, then asked another and another. We talked numbers for 10 minutes while Nathan watched from across the room. I saw my brother's smile tighten. He did not like that the investor was listening to me. He liked it even less when the man shook my hand instead of his on the way out. Not Nathan found me before I left. You do not have to lurk at my party doing math, he said, smiling for the room. I told him I was not lurking. I told him I was learning. If you have ever watched a family pour everything into the loud one while you quietly built something real, you already know how that smile felt. Stay with me. It gets better and it gets earned. Hit subscribe so the next chapter finds you. The whispers started about a month later. They were soft, which is how the worst ones always are. Word went around the family that Evelyn was bitter, that I was jealous of my brother's gift, that I had started some little side thing out of spite to embarrass the family. I knew exactly where it came from. Nathan had a gift for stories, and the one he was telling now was about a sister who could not be happy for him. My mother called me. She did not ask how my work was going. She asked me to please not make things awkward at the next dinner. Do not embarrass us, she said. Like I was the embarrassment in a family handing a grown man $1 million to play office. I did not fight it. I want to underline that because fighting it was the trap. If I argued, I would be the bitter daughter they had already decided I was. So I stayed quiet, and I kept working, and I let the only argument I trusted make itself. One of my aunts had believed Nathan at first. Then her bakery's books fell apart, and she called me half hoping I would say no. I did not. I fixed her quarter, found her $4,000 she had been losing to a bad processor, and never mentioned the things she had said about me. She did the math on her own. The next time the family gathered, she sat by me. People notice who shows up when the lights are on and the cameras are off. I told her the only line I would allow myself. You can believe what is loud, or you can read what is written. I will be over here writing. By midsummer, I had 6 clients, then 8. Foster Ventures stopped being a name on a file and started being a small, stubborn engine. I would take a struggling shop, clean its books, find it a little money through people who trusted my word, and take a fair cut when it worked. Then I would put my cut back in and do it again. I was not getting rich. I was getting real. The work cost me everything else. I would be at the firm by 7, with my own clients until 10 at night, and asleep before I remembered to eat. I did not have much of a life outside the ledgers. That was my flaw, if you want one. I carried everything myself and let almost no one close enough to help. It made me good at the work and lonely in the world. Most evenings, I would swing by the yard with a folder for Walter, even when I did not need to. He had started asking me questions that went deeper than a grandfather making conversation. How did I structure the small deals? What happened to a client's debt if a shop folded? Who held the risk and who held the paper? He asked the way a man asks when he is measuring something. One night, snow ticking on the tin roof again, he asked me to write it all down for him. The whole shape of how Foster Ventures worked. I thought he was just curious. I made him a 1-page summary, clean and plain, and did not think twice about it. I should have asked him why he wanted it. I was too tired and too proud to wonder what my grandfather was building of his own. My father heard I was doing well. and it landed on him like an accusation. He did not congratulate me. He summoned me. I drove out to the house on a Sunday and found him in his study, the door already half closed. He had been hearing my name around town, attached to other people's money, and he did not like the company it kept. He came to the point fast. I was not to use the name Foster for my little operation. The name belongs to the business, he said. My business. He framed it as protecting the family. We both knew it was a test. He wanted to see if I would fold the way I always had. Trade the thing I had built for the privilege of his approval. I thought about every year I had kept his books for free. I thought about the check he had handed Nathan. And I gave him the quietest answer I had. You told me to go earn my own. I am earning it. His jaw worked. He told me I would regret being difficult. I told him I had already filed the business name properly with the state months ago. That part was true, and it was the part that mattered. He could be angry. He could not undo a filing. Left before either of us said something we could not take back. Driving home across town, I realized the name had become the whole fight, which meant it had become important, which meant I would never give it up. He had told me to go earn my own. He just had not expected me to keep the family name while I did it. My brother's millions started to leak by fall. I did not gloat. I barely had time to notice until he made me notice. Nathan called me on a Thursday, and for the first time in our lives, he needed something I had. The exposed brick office was bleeding rent. 2 of his friend partners had drifted off. His big investor, the one who had shaken my hand at the party, had passed. He had spent like the money would refill itself, and now the bottom of the account was coming up fast. He asked me to look at his books. He asked it like a favor he was granting me. I went. I owed myself that much. To see it with my own eyes, the numbers were worse than the whispers. Of the $1 million my father had handed him, maybe a quarter was left, and it was draining weekly. He had built nothing that earned. He had built a stage. I told him the truth. Plainly, the way I had told Tom Vasquez the truth. I showed him where the money had gone, and what cutting now could save. Then he asked the real question, the one he had called for. He wanted me to put Foster Ventures' money into his company. To bridge him. To be his investor. I looked at my brother. $1 million head start and a quarter left. Asking the sister who had started from nothing to plug his hole. I said no. Not cruel. Just clear. I do not pour clean money into a story. He did not tell our parents he had asked. He let them keep believing the launch was thriving. I let him keep that too. It was not my secret to spend. That same season, my grandfather started to slow. It was small at first. He came to the yard later in the morning. Left earlier in the afternoon. He would lose his place mid-sentence and find it again with a small frown. One grey day, with the snow coming down steady on that tin roof, I found him sitting in the office with the lights off, the blue mug cold in his hands. He waved me into the other chair. He did not want help. He wanted to talk. He told me how he had started the yard, which I had heard 100 times, but he told it differently this time. He told me about the year he almost lost it, and the men who had carried him through, and how the thing that scared him most was not failing. It was watching what an easy inheritance did to a person. Money you did not earn, he said, can rot a man from the inside. I have watched it. He did not say my father's name. He did not have to. Then he said something that did not fit the moment, and I almost missed it. I have been getting my papers in order. I asked him what papers. He just smiled the way he smiled when he knew something I did not, and changed the subject to the weather. I drove home that night uneasy, and I could not name why. I told myself he was tired. That old men talk about papers and weather. I told myself a lot of comfortable things. What I did not do was push him. I let a 79-year-old man keep his secrets because I loved him and because I had clients waiting. I would understand the cost of that soon enough. A week later, Walter called me out to the yard for what he said was a business matter. I assumed he wanted his quarterly summary. Instead, when I got there, Tom Vasquez was already standing by the counter, hat in his hands. Looking like a man called to witness something, Walter had the blue mug in one hand and a single sheet of paper in the other. He set the paper on the counter between us in the smell of cut pine and machine oil and told me to read it. It was a term sheet. A simple one-page agreement drawn up plain, the way he liked things. Walter Foster wished to invest $40,000 into Foster Ventures, my fund. He had written it as a real investment with terms, a return, a signature line. I looked up at him, and for once I had nothing clever to say. He had been the first person in my family to believe me. Now he wanted to be the first to back me. And he wanted it on paper, when no one could call it sentiment. Why, Tom? I asked. Because a thing this important, he said, should have a witness. I signed. He signed, his hand slower than it used to be, but steady on the line. Tom signed beneath us both. Walter slid my copy across the counter and kept his own. And he said the line I had been carrying all year with something new on the end that changed its weight. I'm not betting on the loud one. I am betting on the one who shows up. Now it is in writing. I folded that single page and put it in my bag against my chest, like it was worth more than the 40,000. It was. I just did not know yet how much more, or what that ordinary piece of paper would prove in a room I had not walked into yet. Walter's 40,000 did not change my life. It changed Tom Vasquez's. With real capital behind Foster Ventures, I could finally do more than restructure debt. I gave Tom a proper line to expand. He took on a second bay and hired 2 men who had been out of work since the mill cut shifts. 2 families had income again because an old man bet on his granddaughter, and a granddaughter kept clean books. That is what the money did. It did not buy an office with a glass wall. It bought somebody's mortgage payment. I started to see the difference between what Nathan had been given and what I was making. It was not about the size of the check. It was about which direction the money flowed. His ran out. Mine ran on. Around then, a few of the shops that had drifted toward my brother's orbit started drifting toward mine instead. They had heard there was a Foster in town who answered the phone and read the contracts. The name my father wanted to keep from me was bringing me business. I did not advertise it. I just kept showing up. One evening, Tom stopped me on my way out and said something I have never forgotten. You know, your brother had $1 million, he said. And you have got more shops than him with 40 grand. I told him it was not a race. He laughed and said, everything is a race. You just do not have to tell the other guy you are running. I drove home wondering how my father would take it, the day he finally noticed I was not losing. I already knew the answer. Men like my father do not get angry when you fail. They get angry when you do not. The reckoning at the dinner table came in November. My mother hosted the way she did with the good plates and the bad tension. By then, everyone knew I was doing well, and nobody knew what to do with it. My father chose denial. He called my success luck, said small shops were a phase, said real business happened at scale. My mother backed him without quite knowing what she was backing. Nathan stayed quiet, which was its own confession. I did not argue any of it. I passed the potatoes and let them say their lines. Then my mother, refilling her wine, delivered the old verdict like it still held. Nathan carries the name, she said. You just keep the books. She did not even mean it as a knife anymore. She meant it as a fact. Worn smooth from saying, I let it sit. Later, when the table cleared, I stepped onto the back porch for air, and she followed me out. For a moment she was not performing, She looked at the dark yard and said quietly, "I grew up in a house where a girl could not put her name on anything. Not the deed. Not the account. Nothing. It was the closest she had ever come to seeing me. I waited. I think I was waiting for her to finish the thought. To say, 'And I will not do that to you.' She did not. She pulled her cardigan tight, said it was getting cold, and went back inside to her son. That was the whole apology I would ever get. And it ended in the middle of a sentence. I stood out there a while longer in the cold. Then I drove home across town and went back to work. While I was building, my father's big bet was starting to wobble, and I was one of the few people who could see it. The second warehouse had gone over budget the way they always do. Nathan's million was gone, which meant the family had nothing in reserve. And the loan my father had taken sat on a foundation I had read months earlier in that filing cabinet. He had borrowed against the inheritance he expected from Walter. He had spent his father's estate before his father was gone. Now the bank wanted to see that the foundation was solid. They wanted assurance that the Foster holdings would pass to Richard, clean and whole, the way everyone assumed. So my father went to ask Walter to confirm it, to put the succession in writing, the way men do when the money is already spent. And Walter, my grandfather, said nothing. He did not refuse. He did not agree. He just got quiet and tired and changed the subject. And my father came away rattled in a way I had never seen him. I knew then that my father's whole tower stood on a promise. No one had signed. I could have done something with that. I could have warned the bank or whispered to the right ear, or simply waited for it to fall. I did not. I had told myself at the start that I would never take anything from my father. I would only build something he could not take from me. There is a difference, and it mattered to me. So I kept my head down and my books clean. And I let his tower stand or fall on its own crooked math. Pause with me a second. I never set out to ruin my father. I set out to outlast him. If that distinction matters to you, comment the word earned. I read everyone. Now back to the year that turned. I did not know it was the last good day, or I would have stayed longer. It was a bright, cold afternoon at the yard, the kind that smells like frost and pine. Walter was having a clear day, sharp as the old days, and we walked the lot together while he named lumber, the way other men name horses. At the end, he took me into the office and pressed a key into my hand. The key to the yard office. He closed my fingers over it. When the rain comes through that roof, he said, somebody who keeps good books should be the one to fix it. I laughed and said I was not a roofer. He did not laugh. He looked at me steady and said it again. Slower, like he needed me to hear under the words. Somebody who keeps good books should be the one to fix it. I understood he was not talking about the roof. I just did not let myself understand how much he was telling me. Because to understand it, I would have to admit he was running out of clear days. So I put the key on my ring next to my apartment key and my car key. An ordinary key among ordinary keys. And I told him I would come back Sunday. We stood a while in the cold sunlight. The blue mug sat on the counter where it always sat. He told me he was proud of me, which he had shown me 100 ways, but said out loud maybe twice in my life. I drove home that evening lighter than I had been in a year. The key cold against the others in my pocket. Sunday never came the way I planned. By Saturday night, the call started. Walter died in his sleep. A short, sharp illness that took him fast enough to be a mercy, and slow enough to say goodbye. The whole town came to the service. He had put roofs over half of them, and they remembered. I stood at the front and shook every hand and accepted every casserole because that is what I do. I carry things. I made the arrangements my father was too proud and my mother too undone to make. I wrote the obituary. I chose the hymns. I did it all with dry eyes because grief for me comes late and alone. Never on schedule and never in public. Some people read that as cold. Let them. The one thing I let myself feel, I felt at the yard. I went out there the night after the funeral, let myself in with the key he had given me, and stood in the dark office in the smell of sawdust. His blue mug sat on the counter. I washed it, dried it, and set it back exactly where it lived. Then I let 1 year of held breath out. Alone. When no one could call it weakness. What I did not see. Because I was buried in arrangements. My father saw clearly. Even in the receiving line between handshakes, I caught him asking our family attorney a question under his breath. When would the will be read? How soon? He asked it the way a man asks about a delivery he has been waiting on. His own father was 3 days in the ground, and he was already counting. I filed that away with everything else. Grief and arithmetic, side by side in the same man. I should have understood then how frightened he was. Frightened men do the loudest things. The reading was set for 2 weeks later at the office of an attorney named Marion Holt. My father walked in confident. He was the only son. He ran the business. The holdings would pass to him clean and whole. He had staked everything on that math. Marion opened the folder and said something that rearranged the room. Walter had not left a simple will. He had placed everything into a living trust years ago. And on his death, that trust became irrevocable. My father's face changed. A trust was a closed door he did not know was locked. Marion worked through the smaller bequests. Walter's tools went to 2 old yardmen, a college fund for the youngest grandchildren, a sum for my mother that made her cry. Nathan got something too. Walter's old truck, the flatbed he started the business with, and $10,000. I watched my brother's face do math. He had walked in expecting the trust to refill his drained account. Instead, he got a 30-year-old truck. Then Marion got to the only line that mattered. The controlling interest in Foster Lumber and Supply. Before she read who received it, she read the condition Walter had attached. The room went so quiet I could hear the rain. The controlling interest, she said, was to pass to the heir who had during Walter's lifetime built a business or a fund of their own. Documented in writing with a witness. Every head in the room arrived at the same impossible answer. My father's hands flattened on the table. My mother turned and looked at me, and I understood all at once what a single page in my bag had been all along. Marion reached into the folder and drew out an envelope. My name was on the front in Walter's handwriting. She slid it down the table toward me. Past my father, past my mother, past Nathan. Every eye followed it like a last lifeboat. Mr. Foster asked that you open this here, Marion said. In front of everyone. My father said, "This is absurd. She kept his books once. That does not make her." Marion raised one hand and he stopped. Mr. Foster was very specific, she said. Please, Evelyn. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 things. A letter and a single sheet of trust documentation. The official page confirmed what Marion had begun to say. The controlling interest passed to me, the heir who had built a fund of her own. The proof was a 1-page turn sheet dated the previous spring, signed by Walter, by me, and by a witness. The $40,000 had not only been a bet on me, it had been the key to a door he knew I would one day walk through. Then I read the letter. It was short. He said he was sorry he was not there to see my face. He said he had watched a man hand $1 million to the loud child, and a sentence to the steady one, and he decided that day to do something about it. It ended with the line he had been saying to me for a year. I am not betting on the loud one. I bet on the one who showed up. You earned your name long before anyone gave you a dime. It was always yours, Evelyn. I just made it official. I put the letter down. Then my father came apart. He stood up and screamed. He said his father was confused. senile, manipulated. He said I had tricked a dying man. He swore he would fight the trust. Drag it through every court. Marry and let him burn through it. Then she spoke calmly. The trust was established years ago while Mr. Foster was plainly competent. Contesting it would be difficult and costly. He would be spending money. He no longer had to chase a door already locked. That is when the real terror reached his face. He was not just losing an argument. He was losing the foundation his whole tower stood on. The loan. The warehouse. The inheritance he had spent before it arrived. The longer he screamed, the smaller he became. Until the man who had handed out $1 million looked like exactly what he was. A frightened heir who had never built a thing. I stood up. I waited until the room was quiet. Then I reached into my bag and took out the single page I had carried against my chest since spring. The term sheet. 3 signatures. A date from months before he died. I set it on the table. If anyone wants to say my grandfather did not know what he was doing, here is his hand. Steady last spring. Read it. No one moved. They did not have to. I looked at my father. You told me to go earn my own, I said. So I did. This is what my own looks like. I told the room what would happen next. I would keep Foster Lumber open. Make payroll. Restructure the loan my father had built on sand. And I would offer Nathan a real job. Hours and targets he would have to actually do. My brother looked up. For once, he had nothing to say. In the quiet, my mother spoke. She was not talking to anyone really. She was looking at the term sheet. And she said it almost to herself. She carries the name now. A year before she had said Nathan carries the name. Now she had watched her own father-in-law put in writing which child had earned it. She did not apologize. Seeing the truth is not the same as changing. But she could no longer pretend she did not know. I turned to Marion. Let us do this by the book, I said. She nodded. I gathered the letter and the term sheet. I walked out of the conference room, out the front door, into the weather. The rain had passed. The pavement was wet and shining. I drove to the yard. I let myself in with the key Walter had given me. His last good day. The key he said to use when the rain came through the roof. I stood in the smell of sawdust and cut pine. The blue mug sat on the counter. I washed it, dried it, set it back in its place. Some things you do not move. You just keep. The last of the rain dripped off the tin roof. Slow and steady. Like a ledger finally balancing. I had earned my own. He had seen me do it. The weeks after were not dramatic. I kept the yard open. Made payroll. Restructured the loan. I did not crush my father. Crushing him would have cost the town jobs and cost me my grandfather's good name. Nathan took the job. The first month nearly killed his pride. But by the second month, he stopped performing and started working. Once or twice, I caught him doing a thing right just to do it right with no one watching. My father never thanked me. We speak now in the language of business. It is not warmth. It is not nothing. Here is what that year taught me. A name that is given to you can always be taken back. But a name you earn with your own 2 hands and clean books is yours for good. No announcement in any rented hall can ever call it back. That is my story. One announcement that tried to shrink me. 1 year of quiet work. And one grandfather who put his faith in writing where no one could argue it away. If anyone ever told you to go earn your own, take it as a dare and not a dismissal. Then go do it. If this reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. The end.